Live. All right. I'll call this meeting to order. We will get up and give the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everybody. We do have a sign-in sheet back there in that back corner. I believe you guys already took care of that, so. All right. Should we do introductions first? All right, we'll do introductions first. My name is Ed Schindahl. I'm the chair as of right now for the Planning Board for Broadwater County.
I'm Charles Frischman. I'm a new member of the Planning Board.
I'm Dwayne Maher. I'm also a member.
I'm Shay Counts, and I am a new member of the Planning Board.
I'm Dallas Steele, member of the Planning Board.
I'm Nicole Brown. I'm the Broadwater County Community Development Director and Planner.
And Daylene's hiding behind the computer, where she does a fantastic job. Okay, to start off, we'll call for public comment on anything not on the agenda. Is there any public comment for anything not on the agenda? Nothing on the computer? Okay. All right. We have a whole pile of minutes that need to be approved. And Dallas and I were the only ones that were at some of these. I was the only one that was at
One of them.
quite a few of them.
Yeah, quite a few.
So Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. We had the meeting with Deputy County Kaylin Minor and Community Development. Nicole Brown presented a working draft subdivision regulation changes for the sections on roads and section on fire protection. Dallas, you and I were there, so.
So, Mr. Chair, how does that work when do we just go by, they just trust that that's what happened?
That's
All
what
right,
I
fine.
talked to the commissioners about
Okay.
this, and I says, "What happens when I was the only one there?" He says, "Well, you read them. If it looks right, we'll go that way." So yeah, so you and I have to either approve or disapprove of the first,
Yeah.
this one, and I think two more. So
Okay. You want to do it? You want to do them all, or how do you want to?
can we do them all at once, or do we need to do each one?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to respond?
Please.
So you can do them all at once, and it will not be by vote, since clearly, as Dallas alluded to, there's not a quorum that were present at those meetings to make the vote. So you could simply say, I approve or I disapprove. And then you, as the chairman, sign them if they're approved. So it's not necessarily a vote, but you
So
can
we
certainly
won't-
do them all at once.
Okay.
If you've read through them and you didn't see any
Yeah.
issues, or even if you did, you can pause and correct issues.
Sure. Okay, so June 11th was what I stated. June 25th, 2024. We had board manager continue reviewing proposed amendments to the subdivision regulations on streets and roads. Dallas, you were there on that one. Tuesday, August 13. Myself, Mike Delger, and Janine Stone were the ones here. Vice Chair Delger made a motion to recommend amendments to the subdivision regulations to the county commissioners. Stone seconded. Motion passed. December 10th was a public hearing for Lot 44 Wheatland Meadows subsequent minor subdivision. Deanna and myself were the ones that were here for that. I didn't see anything wrong on that. So. And then Tuesday, January 14th, 2025, we had a public hearing for Lot 44 Wheatland Meadows subsequent minor subdivision. Deanna, myself, and Nicole were at that one. I don't see anything wrong with that one, so guess these will all stand as approved, as I see no mistakes or any additions for that, so I will sign these and get them posted. All right. New business. We need to have election of officers. So I will if there's any motions for officers for the planning board.
I move that Ed Schindel continue as chair of the Broadwater County Planning Board.
Okay, Ed has been nominated. Is there any more nominations for chair? Any more nominations? Any more nominations? So can we do a motion on each officer? Okay, is there a motion to leave me as chair for this next year?
I moved.
Dallas
that.
moved.
Yeah.
Second?
I second that.
All right, Shay seconded. Any discussion on that? Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Ed is still chair. Vice chair, any nominations for vice chair? I nominate Dallas Deal. Is there any other nominations for? Is there a second to that one?
I'll second that.
Shay's gonna second that. Ha, see, I'm not the only one that's gonna railroad you.
I guess turnabout's fair play.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Any other nominations? Okay, all in favor for Dallas as vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay. Do we have a secretary? Daleen, okay. Any other officers then for this? Okay. Well, looks like you and I got the offices.
Okay.
All right. All right, that's done. Okay, next item for new business is discussion decision on Counts Hay and Cattle Minor Subdivision. Do you guys have anything to present?
Mr. Chair, may I interject one quick thing?
Sure.
Shay Counts, it's a very unusual last name. Shay, can you verify, are you related to Mrs. Counts?
No, I'm not.
Thank you. Okay, and you can confirm that.
I
Just for the
confirm.
record, you
I am
confirm. Thank you.
not related.
When I saw that, I thought, what are the chances? But it needed to be on the record, so thank you. Go ahead and proceed, Tessa.
Tessa Counts, TessaCounts. Prior to getting into the staff report, I'd just like to make very clear, as evident in the application, contrary to what the staff report states, our intention is to build 2 residences on the property. The staff report indicates 1. Our intention is 1 home for my mother-in-law, and then my husband and I will reside in the barn in a smaller living space. So the need for likely 2 septic systems and potentially 2 wells is present. Just wanted to make that very clear from the get-go. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, Nicole, can you go through the staff report for us?
Absolutely. And Mr. Chair, I did want to address that. I know Tessa and I, when we were speaking previously, and I'd hoped to have this conversation today, she was very forthright in our pre-application meeting that there were 2 residences. I just couldn't tell from the application that 2 were being proposed because the application stated single family dwelling. And so I just wanted to be really clear that I can certainly amend the staff report in those locations, and I'll amend it where I go. But it might be beneficial for Mrs. Counts to add something to the application, just even a 1-page saying we intend to have 2 structures, because as this application moves on to the commissioners, I want it to be very, very clear, because our conversations although I recall them, it was not indicated in the application that 2 residences were being planned that I could see. So it wouldn't hurt just to have something to transfer to the commissioners besides the staff report. But that's all. It doesn't change your application any.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So does this require, is this that come under the caveat of new information where we have to have another meeting?
Good question.
Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, good question.
I've just been burned on, we want to be
Tell
sure.
me more. Mr. Chair, may I ask Mrs. Counts a question?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Can I refer you to Tessa? I'm sorry. We can be informal, correct? Okay. Can you point to anywhere in the application that maybe I missed where it states 2 residences? Do you know right off the top of your head? I don't want this to be perceived as new information where we have to pause and come back and do it again. So it could be something that I missed, and let's hope that that's the
This
case.
should not be perceived as new information. Off the hand, I can't give you a page,
Okay.
but I do know that it is very evident within the application.
Okay.
If you give me a few minutes, I can highlight that for you.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, you may.
Would it be pertinent then, as opposed to putting Tessa on the spot, to point to the application right now standing here? Can I read through the staff report, and then as I'm reading through it, because you've already read the staff report, correct?
I did.
Okay, so as I'm reading through the staff report, you can go to the application and maybe find the locations where it talks about too?
I did. I also included a cover letter with the application outside of the body. Each one of you were provided in the cover. The last sentence of the second paragraph, it's our goal, as seen in the body of this application, to build 1 home and a barn with a living space.
Okay,
There it is.
perfect. And I stuffed my papers in the front binder, and so I did miss that. So. Anytime there's new information, just for the board's reference and for the public's reference, anytime there's new information, we have to pause, stop the clock, relook at the information, and then come back. And we really don't want to do that. So thank you. So with that, Mr. Chair and members of the board, I would like to say that I erroneously, in my staff report, stated 1 residence based on the application information because I did not read the cover letter. But the cover letter, as you can see in your packet, clearly states, as Tessa just pointed out, 1 residence and 1 barn with a dwelling unit. So that was my error, and I will correct those errors as I read the staff report, so as you follow along.
Do you have an extra copy of the staff report?
There should be one in the book I took away from you.
Oh,
Stand by.
okay, thanks.
I have it right here.
I got one.
Do you need one now? And so for the new members of the board, the way this works, when a subdivision application is submitted, Mr. Chair, may I
Yes.
speak freely? I'm sorry. When a subdivision application is submitted, I review the application for element completeness, which is essentially to go through a list, a checklist, to ensure that all of the items are included in the application that are necessary. So that's step 1. Step 2 is sufficiency review, and that's where I actually go through and read each section of the application, except for clearly the cover letter, which I did not do in this instance, and make sure that the application is sufficient. And once I deem it sufficient, the applicant then moves forward to the planning board stage. So the planning board, you are tasked with taking into account my staff report. This is my report as staff. This is my report to you as planning board. You determine if you think my report accurately reflects the application. You are under no obligation to make a decision today, and by decision I mean recommendation, because you are a recommending board. So when you are prepared, you will recommend preliminary plat approval with conditions, denial, or preliminary plat approval with no conditions, which typically it's with conditions. But your recommendation will be to the governing body, the commissioners. So you are under no obligation to do that today. If you choose to not make a motion today to grant preliminary plat approval with conditions, denial, or preliminary plat approval, then you will need to meet likely in the next 10 days, 10 working days. because there's a 35 working day time clock. So as you see on my staff report, the review period ends April 22nd. So if you look under the section titled General Information, the review period will end April 22nd, which means the governing body, the commissioners, must make their decision by April 22nd. The commissioners meet on Wednesdays, so I can tell you, and the commissioners like to have 2 meetings if possible. So that would mean the commissioners will get it the 16th and the 9th of April. So you would need to meet sometime next week and or the week after, one of those 2 weeks, to have a follow-up meeting in order to make your recommendation if you're not prepared to do so today. So I don't want you to feel under any pressure whatsoever. For the 3 of you, this is your first subdivision application. Always feel free to ask questions, through this whole process. But so what happens at this juncture, I'm going to go through and I'm going to read the staff report into the record. It can be a little dry, and I'll do my best to get through it as quickly as possible. So I'll read the staff report. When I conclude the staff report, then Mr. Chairman will open it up for board discussion. You're free to ask questions of the applicant. You're free to speak amongst each other. It is always important, before you ask anyone a question, you have to direct your question to the chair. So in this instance, you simply couldn't say, Tessa, can I ask you a question? You say, Mr. Chairman, can I ask Tessa a question? Or can I ask staff a question? Just so you know as far as procedures go. And I'm sure I've missed something, but with that, I'm going to get into the staff report. And as I stated previously, I'll make the corrections from 1 to 2 residences as deemed appropriate as I'm reading along. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to read my staff report into the record.
Please do.
All right, so this is a staff report for the Counts Hay and Cattle Minor Subdivision. This is to the Broadwater County Planning Board from myself, the Broadwater County Community Development Director. This is a proposed subdivision to be known as Counts Hay and Cattle Minor Subdivision. The date of application was November 14th, 24. They received element completeness on January 13th of 25. Date of sufficiency was March 4th of 25, and the review period will end April 22nd of 2025. Subdividers are Ryan, Norma, and Tessa Counts of Townsend, Montana. Subdividers representative is Tessa Counts. Legal description. The property is situated in Section 9, Township 7 North, Range 3 East in Broadwater County. Executive summary. The subdivider intends to create one lot from an existing 138.8 acre parcel with an agricultural covenant in place. This lot will be used for agricultural and residential purposes. Wastewater will be provided via an individual on-site wastewater treatment system, and that's where I will make an amendment to 2 and make that plural. Water will be provided via individual on-site wells. Access will be provided from Radcliffe Trail via South Fork Ray Creek Road. The required preliminary review fee of $1,750 has been paid. Request. Approval of the one-lot minor subdivision for one single-family home. I'm also going to pause here for a moment because this is not a typical subdivision that you would see. There is an agricultural covenant in place, which means this parcel was created utilizing an agricultural exemption. So there was no subdivision review process completed when this parcel was created. So with an agricultural covenant in place, essentially that means the structure, and it is in Montana Code annotated, that it can be used for only agricultural purposes. So in the instance of Mr. and Mrs. Counts, they would like to obviously live on this structure. So they have to go through this subdivision process simply to lift that agricultural covenant. So it may seem redundant or nonsensical that we're reviewing a subdivision application for one lot where no lots are being created, but subdivided doesn't necessarily mean divided. It's simply the process for lifting that agricultural covenant. So, moving on. Staff recommendation. Staff recommends approval of the proposed Counts Hay and Cattle Minor Subdivision preliminary plat, subject to the conditions of approval based on the recommended findings of fact included in the staff report. Location. The proposed subdivision is located off of Radcliffe Trail, approximately 8 miles northeast of the city of Townsend. Existing development and uses. The property is currently agricultural land. Adjacent land use to the north and south are residential, to the east is agricultural, and to the west is residential. Public comment. Public comment will be taken at the March 18th, 2025 Planning Board regular business meeting and subsequent commissioner meetings. Project background. Water is proposed to be provided via an individual well, and that will be plural. The well sites will be reviewed and approved by the Broadwater County Environmental Health Officer. Wastewater is proposed to be managed utilizing individual wastewater treatment systems. The Broadwater County Environmental Health Officer will review and approve the location of the wastewater treatment systems. Access will be off of Radcliffe Trail. The developers are proposing a variance for the allowance of a shared driveway with one other residence outside of this proposed subdivision. Staff analysis. Review is performed pursuant to the Montana Subdivision Platting Act, Title 76, Chapter 3, Montana Codes Annotated, the 2024 Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, and the 2024 Broadwater County Growth Policy. The proposed preliminary plat, Counts Hay and Cattle Minor Subdivision, as submitted by the subdivider, together with the required supplementary plans and information, appear to satisfy the requirements of these regulations and comply with the Broadwater County Growth Policy, with the suggested mitigating conditions. Criteria for review. In accordance with MCA 76.36083, a subdivision proposal must undergo review for impacts on the following primary criteria. 1. Agriculture. 2. Agricultural water user facilities. 3. Local services. 4. Natural environment. 5. Wildlife and wildlife habitat. 6. Public health and safety. 7. Compliance with the county subdivision regulations. 8. Compliance with survey requirements. 9. The provision of easements within and to the proposed subdivision for the location and installation of any planned utilities. And 10. A provision providing legal and physical access to each parcel within the proposed subdivision. Findings of fact and conclusions. Impacts on agriculture. Definition of agriculture. Farming or ranching include the cultivation or tilling of the soil, the production, cultivation, growing, harvesting of agriculture or horticultural commodities that are on site, such as food, feed, and fiber, the raising of livestock and poultry, bees, biological control insects, fruits and vegetables, and sod, ornamental, nursery, and horticultural crops, and including timberlands and forest lands. This is taken from the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, definition number 4. Narrative. According to the preliminary plat application, none of this property is considered prime farmland if irrigated. Finding. This proposed subdivision should not have an effect on agricultural productivity since only the home site location, two home site locations are being removed from agriculture. Per Chapter 5A of the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, all subdivisions must be designed and developed to provide satisfactory building sites that properly relate to topography and must, to the extent possible, preserve the natural environment. Conditions of approval for the proposed subdivision will require a noxious weed management plan be on file and recorded with the final plat. Restrictive covenants providing notice of the agricultural operations in the vicinity, that the property shall be maintained in a weed-free manner, and restraining domestic pets on the property. Other conditions of approval will provide the opportunity to financially guarantee any improvements required by the weed management plan. Conditions of approval number 6, 8C, 8G, 8H, and 9 are required to mitigate impacts on agriculture. A full list of the conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion. The impacts on agriculture, as set forth in the findings of fact, will be mitigated by the imposed conditions of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Impacts on agricultural water user facilities. Definition of agricultural water user facilities. Those facilities which provide water for irrigation or stock watering to agricultural lands to produce agricultural products. Any part of an irrigation system historically used to produce an agricultural product on property used for agricultural purposes. These facilities include, but are not limited to, ditches, headgates, pipes, and other water conveying facilities. This is taken from Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, definition 6. Narrative. The proposed subdivision will create one residential lot, which that is correct. It will be one lot. Findings. The proposed subdivision property should not have an impact on any agricultural water user facilities since only 2 residences will be added to the property. Conditions of approval numbers 8C, 8G, 8H, and 9 are required to mitigate impacts on agricultural water user facilities. A full list of the conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion. The impacts to agricultural water user facilities, as set forth in the findings of fact, will be mitigated by the imposed conditions of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Impacts on local services. Definition of local services. All services or facilities local government is authorized to provide that benefit their citizens, such as water supply, sewage disposal, law enforcement, fire protection, emergency services, transportation system, educational system, noxious weed control, as well as services that local government does not provide, such as power, telephone, state highways, etc. This is taken from the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, definition number 40. Narrative. The proposed subdivision is proposed to have access via a shared driveway off of Radcliffe Trail. It is within the jurisdiction of the Broadwater County Sheriff's Office as well as the Townsend School System. Fire protection will be offered by the Broadwater County Rural Fire District. Excuse me. Findings. Solid waste. The residents will haul their solid waste to the Broadwater Solid Waste Canister site in Townsend, or they will have the option of hiring an independent contractor to pick up their solid waste. Mail delivery. It is anticipated that mail will be delivered by the United States Postal Service, and plans for any mail receptacles on site are subject to review and approval by the Townsend Post Office. Utilities. It is anticipated that Northwestern Energy will provide electrical service to the proposed subdivision. Future dry utilities are anticipated to be installed underground. Roads and traffic. No transportation plan has been officially adopted for this area. The proposed development will likely not cause an impact to Radcliffe Trail nor South Fork Ray Creek Road. The estimated average daily trips for 2 residences is 16. Schools. The proposed subdivision is served by the Townsend schools, and the subdivision could potentially produce 3. And just so you know, there as a point of reference, we in Montana Code annotated each structure or each lot is anticipated to produce 1.5 students. So whenever there's a 1-lot minor, instead of saying 1.5 students, I round up to 2. Clearly, in this instance, if we're doing 2 residences, that is 3. So just so you understand the rationale behind 2 to 3. Could potentially produce 3 students. The potential for new students from this development should not have an impact on existing bus routes. Emergency services. The proposed subdivision is within the Broadwater Sheriff's Department's jurisdiction. Due to the rural nature of this subdivision, response times for emergency services could be longer than expected. Fire services. The proposed subdivision is located within the Broadwater Rural Fire District. The nearest firehouse is the Duck Creek Fire Station, an unmanned volunteer firehouse. The subdivider will need to propose a fire protection plan for review and approval by the Broadwater Rural Fire District prior to final plat approval. However, the developer has requested a variance from providing a fire protection plan. The variance request will be presented to the governing body for a decision prior to granting or denying preliminary plat approval. This variance request can be found in the preliminary plat application as item number 30. Conditions of approval numbers 4, 5, 7, 8B, and 10 are required to mitigate impacts on local services. A full list of conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion. The impacts to local services, as set forth in the findings of fact, will be mitigated by the imposed conditions of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Impacts on the natural environment. Definition of natural environment. The natural environment is defined as the physical conditions which exist within a given area, including land, air, water, mineral, flora, fauna, sound, light, and objects of historic and aesthetic significance. This is from the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, definition number 54. Narrative. According to the preliminary plat application, the property is relatively flat with no waterways or wetlands. The proposed subdivision is outside of the FEMA mapped 100-year floodplain. 3. Findings. The property is located within the Intermountain Seismic Belt that extends through western Montana and frequently produces small earthquakes and has previously developed some major earthquakes. Property damage and risk can be minimized with construction techniques and earthquake planning. Per Chapter 5B of the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, the design and development of subdivisions must provide satisfactory building sites which are properly related to topography and must, to the extent possible, preserve the natural environment. All grading, drainage, and erosion control shall be in compliance with Chapter 5J of the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations. All post-development generated stormwater will be detained within the subdivision boundaries. A stormwater pollution prevention plan will be implemented and will remain in effect during the construction phase of this project and until disturbed soils are properly stabilized. The grading and drainage plan will be provided for review to the environmental health officer. Per Chapter 5T of the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, a weed management plan shall be approved by the Broadwater County Weed Board prior to the subdivision application being considered complete. A noxious weed management plan has been completed by the developer, submitted and approved by the Broadwater County Weed Coordinator and the Broadwater County Weed Board. No critical plant species have been identified. Existing vegetation will only be disturbed for necessary construction of roads, driveways, utilities, and structures. Any construction disturbance will be reseeded with an approved grass seed mix. A weed management plan has been approved by the Broadwater County Noxious Weed District to control and prevent the growth of noxious weeds. The subdivider will be responsible for adhering to the weed management plan until all lots are sold or the responsibility is turned over to a homeowners association. This is from the preliminary plat application, item number 27. A letter was received from the Montana Historical Society on June 27, 2024 for the Counts Hay and Cattle Miner subdivision to determine if there are any known historical, cultural, or archaeological sites which may be affected by the proposed development. According to Damon Murdo, MHS Cultural Records Manager, there have been no previously recorded sites within the designated area. This is taken from the preliminary plat application, item number 32. Conditions of approval number 6, 8, C, and 10 are required to mitigate impacts on the natural environment. A full list of the conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion, the impacts on the natural environment, as set forth in the findings of fact, will be mitigated by the imposed conditions of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Impact on wildlife and wildlife habitat. Definition of wildlife and wildlife habitat. Those animals that are not domesticated or tamed, or as may be defined in a growth policy, and the place or area where wildlife naturally lives or travels through. This is taken from the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, definitions 93 and 94. Narrative. Wildlife such as antelope, mule deer, white-tailed deer, upland game birds, other small birds, rabbits, and other rodents likely utilize the proposed subdivision. However, there should be no displacement of wildlife since the surrounding area is residential and expansive agricultural property. Findings. The impacts on wildlife habitat will be negligible based upon the surrounding uses. Landowners are encouraged to install wildlife-friendly fencing, contain domestic animals, and secure solid waste to reduce wildlife incidents whenever possible. Condition of approval numbers 8C and 8H are required to mitigate impacts on wildlife habitat. Full list of the conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion. The impacts to wildlife habitat as set forth in the findings of fact will be mitigated by the imposed conditions of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Impact on public health and safety. Definition of public health and safety. The prevailing healthful sanitary condition of well-being for the community at large. Conditions that relate to public health and safety include, but are not limited to, disease control and prevention, emergency services, environmental health, flooding, fire, or wildlife hazards, rock falls or landslides, unstable soils, steep slopes, or other natural hazards, high voltage line or high pressure gas lines, and air or vehicular traffic safety hazards. This is from the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, definition number 67. Narrative. The proposed residence will be served by an on-site well. 2 wells, excuse me. The residences will have their own wastewater treatment systems, as well as stormwater retention basins. Findings. Water supply. The proposed subdivision is not within the service area of a public water system. The proposed lot will be served by individual on-site water wells drilled into the lot. It's not each lot. Let's say into the lot. According to the preliminary plat application. The use of these exempt wells is subject to review and approval by the DNRC. Wastewater for the proposed subdivision will be provided by the use of individual on-site wastewater treatment systems. The Broadwater County Environmental Health Officer will review and issue approval for the lot for adequacy and impact of the wastewater systems on groundwater quality. Stormwater. A stormwater retention plan will be created with concurrence by the Broadwater County Environmental Health Officer prior to final plat approval. Condition of approval numbers 5, 8C, 8D, 8E, 8F, and 10 are required to mitigate impacts on public health and safety. A full list of the conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion. The impacts on public health and safety, as set forth in these findings of fact, will be mitigated by the imposed conditions of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Excuse me. Compliance with subdivision regulations. Findings. The proposed subdivision meets all subdivision regulations, and it will remain in compliance with these regulations if all conditions of approval are satisfied. 3 variances have been requested. Each of the 3 variances will need to be approved individually by the governing body prior to granting preliminary plat approval. Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations, Section 1J addresses variances, and Section 1J3 addresses variance criteria. Specifically, Section 1J3A states, the granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare or injurious to other adjoining properties. The first variance request is from Subdivision Regulations Section 5FB, which states no single lot may be divided by a public road, alley, or public rights-of-way. Big Country Drive runs east-west through the entire length of this parcel close to the southern boundary line. Since Big Country Drive only serves one additional home site, should the governing body decide to grant this variance, the impact should be minimal. The second variance request is from Subdivision Regulations Section 5H, which states roads accessing, abutting, or serving 2 or more parcels or dwellings are considered roads. The developers are requesting a variance to allow for a shared driveway off of Radcliffe Trail. Currently, this shared driveway is a 30-foot wide access easement providing access to one existing home site. According to the developer's variance request, they have been in communication with the adjacent landowner and have verbally committed to continually maintain the shared driveway to its current standards. Should the governing body decide to grant this variance, the developers would be required to construct this shared driveway to Broadwater County, and that should say would not. They would not be required to construct this shared driveway to Broadwater County subdivision road standards. There is no requirement to construct a driveway.
Nicole,
Yes, sir.
in that line that says, should the governing body decide not to grant this variance, you skipped over the not part on that.
I put the not in the wrong spot in saying it, didn't I?
okay.
No, thank you. No, when I read it. You're right.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Let me read that sentence again. Maybe I had it right the first time, and I think my brain processed it differently this time. Should the governing body decide to not grant this variance, the developers would be required to construct this shared driveway to Broadwater County subdivision road standards, and that is an accurate statement. So if the variance is not granted, excuse me, I had to put a cough drop in. If the variance is not granted, the developers would be required to build the shared driveway to a Broadwater County subdivision road standard. So the statement is correct as written. My apologies for making that confusing. If the commissioners do, the governing body, when we refer to the governing body as the commissioners, if the commissioners do grant the variance, there's no requirement to construct it. The third variance request is from subdivision regulations section 5R, which states a water supply of sufficient volume for effective fire control must be provided within the subdivision. The developer's reasoning for requesting this variance is due to the fact that they do not intend to further develop this property while in their ownership. They have stated that they intend to install a fire sprinkler system in any building constructed on the property that may be used for residential purposes. However, since Broadwater County does not have a building inspector, there would be no way to verify nor require the installation of fire sprinkler systems. Should the governing body decide to grant this variance, the developers should be made aware that this is a risk they are taking in terms of fire protection and personal safety. All conditions of approval are required to address compliance with the subdivision regulations. A full list of the conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion. Compliance with the subdivision regulations, as set forth in the findings of fact, will be addressed by the imposed condition of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Compliance with survey requirements. Findings. A land survey and plat completed by a registered land surveyor in the state of Montana will need to be prepared. A review of the plat by the Community Development Department and the examining land surveyor at the time of final plat application will ensure that the plat conforms to all conditions of approval, plat rules, and regulations. Condition of approval number 3 is required to address compliance with survey requirements. A full list of the conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion. Compliance with the survey requirements, as set forth in the findings of fact, will be addressed by the imposed condition of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Provision of easements within and to the proposed subdivision for the location and installation of any planned utilities. Findings. Utility easements will have to be shown and described on the plat in accordance with the subdivision regulations and in consultation with the utility providers. Where utilities are or will be installed and where necessary for the future extension of services. Conditions of approval number 7 is required to address the provision of easements within and to the proposed subdivision for the location and installation of planned utilities. A full list of the conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion. The provision of easements within and to the proposed subdivision for the location and installation of any planned utilities as set forth in the findings of fact will be addressed by the imposed condition of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Provision of legal and physical access to each parcel within the subdivision. Findings. Legal and physical access to the subdivision is provided via Radcliffe Trail, which is a privately maintained public road. Therefore, no approach permits are required. Conditions of approval number 7 is required to address the provision of legal and physical access to each parcel within the proposed subdivision. Full list of the conditions of approval is found starting on page number 10. Conclusion. The provision of legal and physical access to each parcel within the proposed subdivision as set forth in the findings of fact will be addressed by the imposed conditions of approval based upon the record when satisfactorily completed. Recommended conditions. The Counts Hay and Cattle minor subdivision is recommended for approval with the following conditions. Number 1. Any and all adopted state and county requirements and standards which apply to this proposed subdivision must be met unless otherwise waived for cause by the governing body. Number 2. Plans for sewage treatment and water supply shall be submitted to the Broadwater County Environmental Health Office for review and approval. The letter of approval shall be filed with the final plat. All specifications in the approved plan shall be met. Number 3, the subdivider will be required to submit the preliminary and final plat drawings in electronic format to Broadwater County in ArcGIS, AutoCAD, or MicroStation format. Additional materials may be requested by the county in electronic format to facilitate review of application materials. Number 4, plans for the location and installation of individual mailboxes shall be reviewed and approved by the United States Postal Service prior to installation. The subdivider shall submit documentation from the United States Postal Service verifying their review and approval. When required, the subdivider shall provide an off-street area for mail delivery. The subdivider, its successors, and assigns shall be responsible for all costs associated with meeting this condition of approval. Number 5. Prior to submitting the final subdivision plat application, the applicant shall complete a fire protection plan for the purpose of furthering fire protection. The fire protection plan should be created with concurrence by the Broadwater County Rural Fire District. Number 6. Prior to any development and/or soil disturbance, the applicant shall submit a subdivision noxious weed management and revegetation plan for the proposed subdivision to the Broadwater County Weed District for review and approval. All specifications and requirements of the approved plan shall be met at the cost of the applicant. The applicant shall submit documentation to the Broadwater County Community Development Department from the Weed District, verifying their review and approval. Number 7, the final plat shall be prepared in accordance with the applicable state survey requirements, Montana Subdivision and Plating Act survey requirements, and the county subdivision regulations. The final plat shall be in substantial compliance with the plat and plan submitted for preliminary plat review, except as modified by these conditions. The final plat shall provide for the following: A, all existing and proposed utility easements on the subject property, and B, all existing access and utility easements adjacent to the subject property. Number 8, the book and page reference to the restrictive covenants filed with the county clerk and recorder shall be indicated on the face of the final plat. In addition, the foregoing restrictive covenants shall be placed upon the property and shall provide for the following: A, notice is hereby given that all lots shall be used for residential purposes only per the subdivision application. And I want to pause there. That does not mean that it could not still be used for agricultural purposes. It simply means it could not be for commercial or industrial purposes. So for residential purposes only. B, notice is hereby given that each owner of any lot by acceptance of a deed, therefore, whether or not it shall be so expressed in such deed, waives the right to protest joining or the amendment of a rural improvement district for the installation, maintenance, preservation, and repair of the following: roads that provide access to the subdivision, stormwater improvements for the subdivision, fire protection improvements for the subdivision. C, notice is hereby given that each lot shall be maintained in a weed-free manner, and a noxious weed and revegetation plan has been prepared for the subdivision and is on file with the Broadwater County Clerk and Recorder's Office. D, notice is hereby given of the potential health risk from radon concentrations, and that such risk can be evaluated through soil tests and mitigated through radon abatement techniques incorporated into structures. E, notice is hereby given that all structures within the subdivision should be constructed to specifications which meet or exceed equivalent provisions in the applicable state building code for this seismic zone, which is Zone 3. F, notice is hereby given of a restrictive covenant binding the landowner, any heirs, successors, and assigns, and all future owners of property within the subdivision, agreeing therein to hold Broadwater County harmless and indemnify Broadwater County from all claims, demands, obligations, suits, causes of action, damages, and liability, including the county's costs and attorney's fees, arising in any manner whatsoever out of or relating to the existence, use, operation, repair, and or maintenance of the following: Subitem 1, exposure to radon; 2, earthquake fault zone and any seismic activity; and 3, water availability. G, notice is hereby given of the presence of agricultural operations in the vicinity, and such operations may occur at varying times and seasons and include, but are not limited to, the noises and odors due to the operation of machinery, the pasturing and feeding of livestock, irrigation, and the application of fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides to fields. H, notice is hereby given that domestic pets should be restrained on the property at all times. 9, the subdivider shall include a notarized right to farm declaration with the final plat, affirming that no agricultural or farming operation, place, establishment, or facility, or any of its appurtenances, or the operation thereof, is or becomes a public or private nuisance because of the normal operations thereof, as a result of changed residential or commercial conditions in or around a locality of the agricultural or farming operation, place, establishment, or facility has been in operation longer than the complaining resident has been in possession, or commercial establishment has been in operation. 10, prior to submitting the final plat, the following improvements shall be installed or otherwise guaranteed: A, any necessary improvements required by the stormwater drainage plan, weed management plan, fire protection plan, or approach permits; B, installation of mail delivery facilities; and C, utilities abutting and available to each lot. 11, prior to final plat approval, the applicant shall: A, provide proof that all real property taxes and special assessments assessed and levied on the property are paid for the current tax year, including any past delinquencies; and B, provide documentation showing the applicant is the lawful owner of the property with the apparent authority to subdivide the same, and showing the names of lien holders or claimants of record. And that concludes my staff report.
I do have one thing in the staff report. Under C on page 4 of 14, under number 3, findings, utilities.
Okay.
It's not Northwestern Energy up there. It's
Vigilante?
Vigilante.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else have any comments?
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
If I may, under page 5 of 14, item D, impact on the natural environment. Under narrative number 2, it says, according to the preliminary plat, the application, the property is relatively flat with no waterways or wetlands. I don't think it's very flat.
Okay.
I think it's relatively moderately sloping towards the west.
North and south, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it just depends.
Do you want to come up and comment on that?
And this is Tessa Counts, TESSA-COUNTS. East to west,
East to west.
it is moderately sloping
That's
to the
what I
west. To the northwest, there is small drainage that does have some slope to it, but it's so narrow that you can't even ride a horse across the bottom. It's very narrow.
That's what I was saying.
It's flat in our country. Yes.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, if I can comment.
Yes.
I mean, that's why there's that no build zone, because it's
Right.
probably, that small part between whatever that road is. Big Country Drive. No, it's got a,
Yeah.
but it isn't very, it's not very big.
Tessa.
Yep. Dallas, the no build zone is put into place not so much for the topography, but due to the variance request of splitting a roadway, we're committing to not building to the south side of that road, which is
Right.
the necessary means for the no build zone.
Because it doesn't look to be more than 15% to me. Maybe it is, but, because that's part of the, again, I'm asking too many questions. That's part of our subdivision regulations, right? There's no building on
Correct.
over 15% without mitigation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
But yeah, it's got good drainage, but
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments?
so the question that I had, if I can jump in. So we're talking about shared driveway, but then later on, it says in the findings on 10 of 14, J1 says that Radcliffe Trail is a privately maintained public road. So because that's the, again, that's the access to your dwellings.
Correct.
And so, from what I understand of our definition of a shared driveway, wouldn't this go around that? It's a privately maintained public road, so it wouldn't classify as a shared driveway, so then there wouldn't have to be a variance for a shared driveway?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
So Dallas, what I'm showing Dallas here is on tab 4, the preliminary plat. You can see Radcliffe Trail along the eastern boundary of the Savannah Estates subdivision. And Radcliffe Trail goes north along the eastern boundary of Lot 1 and Lot 20 of the Savannah Estates. So that's Radcliffe Trail, and it ends at that location. So the variance is not necessarily from that intersection with South Fork Ray Creek, because there's no issue with Radcliffe Trail. The issue is when they leave Radcliffe Trail and they're sharing this driveway, because Mr. Radcliffe actually lives here, so he uses this easement here as his driveway. And then Mr. and Mrs. Counts, and then subsequently Mrs. Norman Counts will be living here. So there will be 3 residences along the shared driveway, but from where it leaves Radcliffe Trail to where they branch off. Does that make sense? And I know I'm not showing you on each of your maps.
Okay.
No, Radcliffe is not the whole entire length of the road. Radcliffe Trail ends at the northeast
Okay.
corner of
Well, yeah, I
Lot
didn't-
20
I
of
didn't
Savannah
drive
State.
across there, so when I went and looked at it,
So the variance
I didn't know there
request,
was a dwelling over there.
Yeah, way
Okay.
back in here, it used to be Ahern's.
I see, okay, that makes more sense now.
If I may ask, in the addresses of adjoining property members, what is Mr. Radcliffe's address?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
And I will respond with an I do not know. I know it's Radcliffe Trail,
So,
but I don't know what the number is. You know, the number would be wherever he departs Radcliffe Trail at that corner, and it's probably in this application under adjacent. No, you didn't have to provide adjacent property.
yes, I did.
You did. That's right. You didn't have to provide
341
labels because we
South,
didn't.
sorry.
Dallas, did you find something?
Number 5, Robert L. Radcliffe, 341 South Fork, Ray Creek Road, 59644.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, on my 911 addressing map, Mr. Radcliffe does have a Radcliffe Trail address, so I don't know if he's using that as his mailing address, that address that's included in here, because typically those are taken, I don't want to speculate where you got it from, but probably from Montana Cadastral, because that's
Correct.
the public information source, and that's where taxes are mailed to. But Mr. Radcliffe's physical address is Radcliffe Trail,
Okay.
but I don't know what that is off the top of my head.
I was just asking in support of Dallas's
So,
question.
again, can I ask?
Yes.
So his address is at the beginning where the easement crosses Counts Handicap. Is that correct? So how his address would start here, because technically this isn't Radcliffe Trail.
That is correct. So what
Okay.
I'm responding to Dallas, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board, all driveways are based on a distance, so whatever distance is traveled down the road. So if you're not within city limits, this would make more sense. So Mr. Radcliffe, whatever distance he travels along Radcliffe Trail, which would be along the eastern boundary of Lot 1 and Lot 20 of Savannah Estates, wherever he exits Radcliffe Trail, that would be his address. And so I don't believe that this has distances on it. If it does, I cannot read them. In any case, so that's where his address would be. And so then, you know, for this property, which I know previously, the previous owners had requested an address of Big Country Drive. If this were approved and Mr. and Mrs. Counts and then Mrs. Norma Counts requested an address, we would have to figure out how to squeeze 3 addresses into that location where they all leave Radcliffe Trail at the very same location and head north. Did that answer your question? I don't know if I
think so.
answered your question
I
fully.
think so.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
To the staff? If they're gonna have it on one lot, will they still need to have 2 addresses even though they're gonna be on one lot on the residence? Will they still have 2 separate addresses?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
So yes, definitely. So from a GIS perspective, which is also a function of my department, so GIS 911 addressing, each habitable structure should, there's no requirement because there's no authority to force folks to have that, but in the interest of public health and safety, every habitable structure should have its own separate address. So in response to your question, if they wanted to have separate power, mail delivery, taxes wouldn't necessarily factor into this because it's all in one parcel, but in the interest of public health and safety, it would be beneficial for them to have 2 separate addresses.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any more comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, are we taking questions regarding the staff report, or are we taking questions regarding the application? Or are you asking for questions regarding the application?
Mainly for the staff report right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I ask another question.
Dallas?
Is there an existing well on the property now?
There is an existing well.
There is, okay. So, may I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
So, this question is in flux with things that are in front of the legislature right now, but we have been noting 2 wells in the staff report, but it could technically be, they could probably use the same well for both dwellings. Is there a requirement now that they have to have 2 wells for 2 residences, or may they, since it is not different lots, can they manifold and use 1 well for 2 residences? Again, this is probably something that's very, I mean, it'll change tomorrow whenever the legislature decides on.
Yeah,
Their
as,
bill.
as of right now, they can use the 1 well for both
Okay.
residences
Okay,
and their cattle water and whatever else, so.
yep, perfect, good. Does that need to be amended in the staff report, or we just let it?
Are you actually planning on putting another well in for the other house?
It is
or-
our intention to sustain under 1 well. It
Mhm.
only produces, if I recall correctly, about 13 GPM. We do have about 45 head of livestock and potentially 2 structures. But we think it is sufficient to sustain
Yeah.
for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Cattle ain't gonna drink all at the same time.
Yeah.
Depends on how big their water source is. If they can get more than one
Well,
head in
yeah,
there.
this is true, and if they're holding them off, that's the other, yeah, but no.
Okay, anything else?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask him a question about the well?
Sure.
Is it been submitted to Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, and there's a GWIC number issued to it? Has it been
Yeah,
registered
where does it happen?
with them? Is it, or was it not yet been identified?
I can't answer that. The only organization that I've worked with is DNRC to upgrade it to under our ownership.
Okay. So
Throughout
I'm
the
sure there is a
application.
GWIC number that is associated with it. Be nice to know.
Should've- May I respond?
You may.
Are you talking about the water right number, or?
No. May I respond again?
Yes.
No, each well has an independent number called a GWIC number, Montana Groundwater Identification Number. And it's located, identified on a website, and that number is also attached to DNRC water rights report.
That's the water right.
May I speak?
Yes.
None of the other subdivision houses down here are showing, on the preliminary plat, are showing wells or any types of identification number to those. I'm not sure why not, but it's important information that we can discuss with another time, or
Okay.
another time when we talk about the application.
Yep.
The county sanitarian will require that information when she writes up the approval, which will probably be a COSA, Certificate of Subdivision Approval.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you may.
I think on GWIX, you could pull that for yourself, Tessa, if you wanted, for the well log off of GWIX. It's a public site, you just make an account for it, if you wanted to pull that off.
Yeah,
It's just
I could do it on my phone.
GWIC.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Comments on staff report?
Mr. Chair, I do have one.
Okay.
After this discussion on the well and water, I would like to make an amendment to the findings on water supply. This would be on page 7. Item number 3A. I'm sorry, section number 3A.
On page
And since
7.
it's a small section, I just want to read my suggested amendments to this section, if I may. So I'm going to read the section in its entirety. The proposed subdivision is not within the service area of a public water system. The proposed lot will be served by the existing individual on-site water well, according to the preliminary plat application. The use of any additional exempt wells is subject to review and approval by the DNRC, because I think that more accurately reflects the current situation and the potential situation. If you're proposing to share the well, it would just like the staff report to reflect that.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask another question? Under page 8, wastewater, is there an individual on-site wastewater system existing on-site now?
No,
There's no residence, there's no discharge,
no.
so there's no structure yet?
By the agricultural covenant,
Right, okay.
no, there's no existing.
I didn't know if they built one. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I ask a question about the agricultural covenant?
Sure.
If that gets lifted, is there anything that holds them back from subdividing this in the future? Would be kind of my big question, considering we have residential currently on the other side of Big Country Road already. There's like 13 lots.
Would you like me to respond,
Yes,
Mr.
please.
Chair? To answer Ms. Count's question, any owner, so I don't want to explicitly state this owner, but any owner of the property, should they desire to subdivide the property, they absolutely would have the ability of going through the same process and submitting a subdivision application. So this does not preclude nor limit anyone in the near or far future from submitting this property for a subdivision application. It simply would come back through this board, through the commissioners, and it would be, no matter the number of lots, it would be a subsequent minor and or a major subdivision, so they would have to go through the public hearing process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything further? You have anything more to add, Tessa?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. So now can we go through the application? And
You can
see
do
if
whatever you would
there's-
like, sir.
If there's any questions or comments on the application?
Mr. Chairman, may I speak?
Yes.
Tessa, please forgive me. I do have a number of corrections that need to be done to the application. Things that maybe I don't understand or missed or such. I'm not sure if I should read them off or if this is something that I could provide in a sheet of paper, such as a deficiency review. So I'm open to procedure on how to address some things that I think need to be fixed.
Do we have any form that he needs to fill or go by?
Mr.
Any
Chair, no,
process?
this would be the appropriate time if Mr. Freshman is prepared to go through those. We can certainly talk about them now. This is the appropriate
Okay.
time and place to do so.
Okay. May I speak freely?
Yes, you may.
So, in the rule, subdivision rules, Tessa, do you have a copy of that? I want everybody to flip to page 22 and 23. This is what I think you used to put together the application, if I'm not mistaken. Because the numbers of the dividers in your application kind of follow this format. '22 and 23. Is everybody there?
Okay, so,
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go down this list, and if necessary, we can flip to the page in the application. So if you have the rules on one side, the application on the other, this will track. So please excuse me a little bit. I'm a scribbler. So the definition of a subdivision under MCA is 76.3.103. That's for the local standards. If this ever went to the state of Montana, they would follow 76.4.103, which is a state review. Some things, so I'm going to skip down to number 3. So if you skip the divider number 3, it says number 3 is a preliminary plat in the rules, but in the application, it's still showing subdivisional fees and review. So my question is, are we following this sheet? Has this been assembled to match the rules or not? The plat is shown on number 4. So if we're,
I believe what you're saying is that my index is off by one number.
there's a few of them.
Okay.
So a lot of my questions are going to be kind of nitpicky, so please forgive me. But they add up.
Okay.
And they add up to an application that is not ready for approval, preliminary plat approval yet, but we're close.
Okay.
We're very close. So looking at number 3, the preliminary plat, this is an amended plat. So my question is, where is the original? Where is the original plat? I'd like to see that. Because on there would have the agricultural covenants which we're trying to exempt or remove. It's not listed. I'm having trouble locating where in the application that agricultural covenants was itemized. It's